and welcome to episode 115 of A Gamer Looks at 40. I'm Bill Tucker, and on this episode, we take a break from Final Fantasy to fix an unfortunate mistake. Now, back in February of 2024, I was conducting a bunch of interviews for the Final Fantasy series, and unfortunately, a few of those interviews I missed. Not missed because I didn't do them or I didn't conduct them, but I kind of just forgot they were there. Mind you, I do this myself, the organization, at least myself. I do have Kev and my brother-in-law, Pete, helping with the interview cutting. And what I do is when I complete an interview, I send it to them or I do it myself. And we cut up the interview into pieces, and that's how I make the main shows. But there are always a couple in this process that just don't make it on anybody's plate. And when you're doing 5 interviews a week sometimes and dealing with kids and work and everything else, things slip through the cracks. And this week's episode is one of those interviews. I had a chance to chat with Ben Magnet. He's the co-host of the Fake Nerd podcast, the BA Pause Menu show. He's a writer for Go Nintendo and a variety of other things as well, Old School Gamer magazine. He is all over the internet writing and producing work. He's a really talented guy and a really just good dude to talk to. And we were intended to talk about early PC gaming and Final Fantasy because that's what I was talking about during the time. During our interview, we talked about early PC gaming, but then branched off into Pokemon, Sonic, and a variety of other topics, none of which had anything to do with Final Fantasy. And unfortunately, this conversation never made it to Kev or Pete or myself and just kind of sat there. So as I was going through the episodes, just kind of refreshing myself, like, all right, did I get everything? A few weeks ago, I looked and said, oops, there are no cut tracks of Ben. This never made it to anybody's plate. So I am fixing this issue now. But the good news is this was a really fun interview that kind of ended up being separate from everything else that I was talking about at the time and really works well as a one-on-one interview in its entirety. So here it is, my apology episode to the one and only Ben Magnet. Thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me about a variety of gaming topics. This is our interview from February 6th of 2024. Let's jump into it. Ben, I appreciate you taking your time to join me to talk about Final Fantasy and PC games. But before we get started, I'd love to hear a bit about yourself, kind of what you do online, any projects you're involved with, and we'll just start rolling from there.
Yeah, sure. So I host a podcast called Basement Arcade Pause Menu, and I also am part of a YouTube channel called Basement Arcade. It started off as Pause Menu was a spin-off of a spin-off because I used to do a show called Fake Nerd Podcast. Our YouTube channel is still up, but me and the guys were like, we've been doing this for over almost 7 years. We're just gonna take a either very long hiatus because we have a bunch of other side projects. And Pause Menu was a place where it's like, I just want to talk about video games and just nothing but video games, but in a more chill, relaxed. Like the tagline is the show where we hit pause, sit back, and just chill.
Nice. I like that. That's great.
Thank you. So I've been doing that for a few years. Some of the guests I have, just recently, I released an episode with a sports YouTuber, Urinating Tree. But I think my crowning achievement with that show was interviewing Howard Scott Warshaw of Atari fame, and that episode won me a very small podcast award called a Snobby, which is something that another podcast does. It's another small independent podcast, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna try and celebrate other shows," and that interview won me the category of best interview show. So that was really cool.
That's amazing. Very cool, man.
Yeah,
congratulations.
So
that's a great guest. He's a really fun guest. I've heard him on other shows too. And he's a lot of fun, really good stories. I'll definitely check that out.
Oh, you should have seen the face when I got the email back saying, yeah, of course, I'd love to come on your show and talk about it. I was like,
that's so cool. I love that. I love it.
Yeah, I was talking to my fiance, and she was like, "Who?" I was like, "The guy who made E.T." Is like, "Wasn't that Steven Spielberg?" I was like, "No, E.T. the video game." And she was like, "Huh?"
I love that. No, not that E.T. The video game.
Yeah, And also, I write for a few video game publications. I write for the British magazine Fusion Gaming Magazine. I also write for Old School Gamer Magazine. And I also write for the website GoNintendo.com. So I am a very busy bee, if it were.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And it sounds like a lot of great projects. So awesome. Glad you're getting out there and doing your writing. And I encourage everyone to check out your stuff for sure. Where's a good place? Is there a good central location where people can just kind of find all your stuff?
You could find it so for my writings and my podcast, you could go, so for the podcast stuff, of course, go to the Thick Nerd Podcast YouTube channel. Just look up Basement Arcade pause menu. You'll find everything. Like the whole playlist is there. Of course, if you turn on if you go to your podcast app of choice, just look up pause menu. We have all the audio recordings there as well. For my writings, you can go to obviously Fusion Gaming Magazine or Fusion Retro Books. I mean, you could purchase the magazine. And even if you go to, I'm pretty sure it's still up, the Fake Nerd Podcast website, there's a tab on the top that says Ben's blog, and it has a bunch of my writings when I would write for the Old School Gamer blog, as well as my Go Nintendo stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, we're here to talk a bit about the old days of games and the things we played them on. Now, I believe you heard one of my sponsor spots on Gamers Week asking people to share some information about like, hey, PCs, right? I love old PCs. I have a real heart for it. I don't dabble in it anymore, but I really do love it. And you reached out like, hey, I have some memory. So here's the question. What's the first PC you owned? What did you play on it? And let's just roll from there.
So the first PC that my family owned, and I remember this very vividly, was a Windows 95 computer.
Okay.
And I woke up one day, this was 1996, mind you. I was in kindergarten. How I still remember this, there's a reason why I still remember this, is I woke up one day, my dad and my younger brother, they were already gone out of the house. And I'm like, where'd they go? And my mom told me, oh, they went to go get something. We're getting a new computer today. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I just went outside and I was just skating around, playing with a neighborhood kid. And it felt like hours went by. Because, when you're that small, like 2 hours seems like an eternity. And when my brother and my dad finally did come home, they set up the computer. And I was just amazed at that. Oh my gosh, we're actually having this computer. And then I was like, does that mean we get to play computer games on it? And it was funny because there was a distinction. Computer games were, games you played on the computer, whereas video games were games you played on the television.
Yes.
Like that was the difference in my house.
Exactly. Do you remember what kind of computer it was? A Windows 95?
Mm-hmm.
And remember what brand it was?
Oh, I think it was a Dell. I want to say...
Okay.
I think. I'm like 99% sure.
Okay.
If my memory serves, there was a Dell logo on the bottom of the tower.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't remember. Because once again, 1996, I was in kindergarten.
And you're in kindergarten, yeah. So that's definitely a harsh memory. What was the first game you played on that?
Oh, the first game I played on it, I want to say it was Doom. Because when my dad came home from, it was either a computer store that had a massive sale, or I live in Southern California, and I also live close to the Pomona Fairplex, or there was this giant computer sale at the Pomona Fairplex, like this computer fair in a way. It's like, hey, come buy computers for on the cheap, or 1996 version of cheap, because even back then computers were still like stupid expensive. We look at prices now, it's like, oh, that's not that bad, but adjust for inflation, it's like, yikes, that's how much we were paying for them back then. Yeah,
they weren't cheap, absolutely.
Yeah, and they came home with, I want to say 3 games. It was Doom, it was ABC Monday Night Football, and an NHL hockey game.
Wow, okay.
But here's the kicker. So, even when I was a kid, my family knows that I'm a huge, when I was that young, Sonic the Hedgehog was my everything. I wanted nothing more than a Sega Genesis, than something to play Sonic the Hedgehog on. So my dad comes home, and he's showing off the computer games that he got, like Doom, Monday Night Football, and NHL, and he goes, okay, now Benjamin, I need to tell you something. There's a Sonic game available for this PC, but they did not have it at the place where we got the computer. So what's going to happen is when I come home from work tomorrow, I'll make sure to get you the game. So you will have a game. You just have to wait because they didn't have it. And I was just ecstatic. I was like, wait, I could play Sonic on here? And once we finally booted up the computer, we looked at we were just like playing around. We went to the programs, and there was the games tab, and then there was a demo. There's a bunch of demos for a bunch of different games. I can't remember what all these games were. I just remember there's like the famous ski game where you ski down the hill and the Yeti comes in.
Oh yeah, Ski Free. Yep.
Yeah,
there's
that. There was one with where you played as like a lioness and you had to go hunt zebras in the wild. That was, I don't remember that one. I just remember there's also I want to think of a platformer where they're this big brawly guy and you punched these green monsters, and then they would once they fell down, their like rib cages would like stick out and there was like green blood.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Once again, it was just so weird. But of course, the demo that I saw that I could now once again, kindergarten, could barely read. Sonic CD. There was a demo for Sonic CD on that Windows 95, on that Dell Windows 95 computer.
Wow.
And we turned it on. I played the first stage, which was the only one that was available, which I think was like the first whole level of Palm Tree Panic. And I was like, you can't play Sonic on here. And I was just amazed. And true to my dad's word, the next day, unfortunately, he wasn't able to come home until super late. But he got Sonic CD. He found, because this was back when Sega, I want to say in like 96, around that time, Sega were importing some of their Genesis or CD games to the PC. And he came home, Sonic CD was there, and that was the game I latched on. That was my video game. That was the first video game that was mine. That was the first video game I owned. And that's my favorite video game of all time. Even though that's not the first Sonic game I ever played.
You know what's amazing? But I had no idea they ported over Sonic games to the PC. I had no idea. This is the first I've heard of this.
Oh, you're going to love this because I want to say a few months later, because once my dad got me Sonic CD, that was it. That was it was all downhill from here. But also they were getting, my brother and I, a few other computer games. I mean, we got the edutainment games, like, Jumpstart for Kids. There was like this dinosaur one that I absolutely loved.
3D Dinosaur Adventure? 3D Dinosaur Adventure?
I want to say yes. I want to say it was that one.
That thing is bang. I had that one on my Packard Bell, on my 486 Packard Bell. Windows 3.1. Yep. It was great.
Oh man. I want to say that was it. But it was, I'm bummed out because I don't really remember the edutainment games all that much. It's more of the, like the fun stuff, because my parents were like, okay, for fun video games, you can only have an hour, but if you want to play the educational games, then we'll give you a little bit more time because it's educational. Like, I also remember they got me an Aladdin math game, which I'm 99% sure Robin Williams voiced. I can't remember. Maybe it was,
cool.
Dan Castellaneta, but I have to look that one up. But yeah, Sonic CD was the catalyst, and then about a few months later, I'm shopping with my mom, and we see Sonic and Knuckles collection for the PC, and she buys it for me on the spot.
Wow, that's some good parent stuff right there. That's some good parent stuff where they recognize you're into something and there was not even a question. That's really very, very, very cool.
We were just shopping through. I want to say it was like a pick and save in like I want to say it was pick and save in the 90s, and there it was, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, Sonic!" And she was like, "Oh, hey, yeah," and she just picks. It had Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, and it had like every iteration of Sonic 3 at the time. And I was just super excited because when I got home and I opened it up, it also came with a comic book. It came with the first issue of the Knuckles the Echidna miniseries that Archie was putting out. And fun fact, I still have that comic book too. It is in
that's so good.
Horrible condition, though.
I'm sure it's terrible. I'm sure you read it 1,000 times too because you had to. You had to.
Read. I just flipped through it.
Yeah, right. True. Again, your kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Yeah, you're still learning all that. But
even my grandmother,
cool,
my grandmother was so sweet. She bought me a Sonic the Hedgehog subscription from Archie Comics, And for a year, every month I was getting a Sonic the Hedgehog comic, and then I was just so happy, and I would just like look through the books, but so many times I would read through these books, and then I just read through them, or I would read, air quotes, I would flip through them so many times, the covers would fall off.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, yeah.
The first Sonic the Hedgehog book I ever got, I not only did the cover fall off, but I'm missing a bunch of pages too. It's just...
I'm sure you remember them, though. You probably could have almost committed to memory at this point, those missing pages.
Well, thankfully, before a little while before Archie and Sega and the whole, the whole lawsuit with Ken Penders happened, Archie was re-releasing their older books as Sonic Archives. So thankfully, I do have a completed version of that issue. I have the entire...
Oh, cool.
I have the entire printed archives run before Archie stopped printing them, and then they lost the license to Sonic and gave it to IDW. Or IDW won the license from Sega.
Right. Yeah, I don't know a ton about Sonic. I have a friend in the community, Gamers with Community on Games with Coffee, who's the biggest Sonic fan I know. One of the two. There's two who fight for that spot. And he was telling me the whole story of of the comics and the whole loss of the licensing, and I was in this world like this was years ago now, but that whole thing is just wild.
Oh yeah, it is a crazy story, but I mean, if I could just move my camera, I actually do have a little Sonic the Hedgehog. I have like a tiny little Sonic the Hedgehog shrine. I don't know if my desk is my dresser where a bunch of my Pop Stars is really messy, but yeah, I have a tiny little shrine. Also, I have a Lego set that's not finished being built yet, which I need to do someday.
Nice, very nice. Time is the enemy to us all, though, when it comes to that stuff. Unfortunately, right?
Amen to that.
So yeah, man. So, what others? So, did you continue with PC gaming? Was that something you did like all as growing up, or was that more of your entry point to then other consoles and things like that?
PC was definitely where I started. I would play video games before because before I moved, we're in the city where my younger brother was born, we had a next door neighbor. He has Sega Genesis. That was my first introduction into video games. And I want to say my first introduction to Sonic the Hedgehog, but then, of course, I saw there was a television show, a few television shows, actually. And then, the comic books, and, Sonic became my favorite thing in the world. When we finally got our PC, that was my introduction to gaming, because, of course, Sonic CD, this sports game. My mom would get me the Sonic and Knuckles collection, and later down the line, I would also get Sonic R because they ported that to the PC. And I also remember saving up as a first grader, saving up my money to buy Sonic Schoolhouse. Now you would think it was an edutainment game starring Sonic the Hedgehog, but I thought you got to play Sonic the Hedgehog. Spoiler alert, it sucks.
No.
It is really bad. And even looking back on it was, and also, you would think for an edutainment game, my parents would be all for buying it. I don't know what the reasoning was, but they were like, nope, you're saving up your money for this one. And I'm like, but it's Sonic, and I get to learn with Sonic. And my parents were like, no, you got to save up for it. So I saved up. I even remember I took the money out of my piggy bank and I counted up all the change I had, and actually it went up because I kept saying it was like $30. And once I got to the magic number of 30, I ran to my parents and said, I got it. I got the money. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, but it says $29.99. That's $30, right? If it says 99, you just add one more to a round number. I have it here. I counted it. I triple counted it. I have the money. And that's when I learned about taxes for the first time.
Oh no, they made you pay the tax on it.
No, I think they were going to at first, but then they saw how distraught I was.
Yeah.
About how, because every time we went to the store, I saw a price. I thought it was, that price. And living in California, I didn't know taxes were a thing.
Taxes are a thing. Oh no, it's funny. My son is 7. Whenever he buys something with his money, I always cover the tax on it. I always say, I'll spot you the extra $3.
Yeah,
I got you. I can totally see how.
I think after my parents saw how distraught I was, they were like, okay, we'll pay the tax for you this time. And I'm just like,
this time, we'll cover you.
I was so bummed. I was like, this is a lie. That was my first
Sonic
internet
Schoolhouse. I'm
Yeah.
looking at screenshots of Sonic Schoolhouse. This looks heinous.
It
This
was.
looks terrible. And I think you can just play it now on Abandonware. I think you can just get it and play it at some point.
Even when I booted up the game, like the first time I booted up Sonic CD, or the first time my mom and I installed Sonic CD, I was blown away because you got to see the opening video, just, the beautiful animation of Sonic Boom. And I was just absolutely blown away. And then I saw the graphics when I got Sonic R, and it went from 16-bit to 32-bit. And just, for me, I mean, looking back at Sonic R, the graphics are not the best, but to me, when you're a kid and you're going from 2D to 3D like that, it was amazing. It's like, video games can do this? Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And also the soundtrack was just absolutely banger. I mean, on my iPhone, I still have a bunch of the songs from Sonic R. I mean, as I've grown older, I played it again on the Gems collection a few years ago. I'll say, it's like, look, Sonic R may not be the best game in the world. It's got some problems, but you know what? I remember having a fun time playing it as a kid, and I will die on the hill that Supersonic Racing is a banger.
I have never played Supersonic Racing, but is that the 3D one? Like a 3D. Hang on.
It was a Sega Saturn. It was like the one Sonic Sega Saturn game, but it was so Sonic R was it was a Sonic racing game, because you would think it's like, you know what, if Sonic runs really fast, there should be a Sonic racing game at some point, and that was the first one. Which would make
sense, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Is that the one where there's one? So last night, I have a friend, G to the Next Level. He was doing a Sonic. He was doing his G-Con, which is
G to the Next Level. Yeah, I know that guy. He was on the show.
Yeah, he's awesome. He did his his G-Con yesterday was his last day, and he was doing nothing but Sonic streaming, and he was streaming a Sonic racing game that was like, there was 5 racers. You had to pick up the little like icons and medals and badges, and the soundtrack was amazing. It was all like late 90s house music.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I want this soundtrack. I was sitting there editing, listen to the soundtrack. I'm like, this is awesome.
Oh, that was Sonic R, 100%.
That's Sonic R. Okay.
Yep. Sonic R.
So good. How funny. I was literally last night, I was jamming along to Sonic R. I was like, this is like legitimate late 90s deep Chicago house. Like, this is great. I am super into this.
Oh no, it was awesome. Like when I was a kid and I finally got all the Chaos Emeralds, not only unlocked the final racetrack, but also unlocked Supersonic. And once I started that racetrack, you actually got to hear the full version of the song Supersonic Racing.
Oh, that's fun.
I was like, oh, this is my jam. I mean, the gameplay is not the best, but I will still die on the hill that Supersonic Racing, Can You Feel the Sunshine, and even Radical Cities, like, those are certified bangers.
Yeah, I'm like, this doesn't look like terribly fun to play, but boy, am I enjoy listening to this. This is a lot of fun to listen to. This is cool.
Which is a huge contrast to Sonic Schoolhouse, because, that game was heinous, and I had no clue what the heck was going on in that game. I thought I was going to play as Sonic, but then they're like, Sonic is like the teacher/headmaster? It's like
weird.
Huh? And there's this math thing where you're walking around a math room trying to solve problems, but you have to go find the numbers, which are the answers. And there's these just bad clip art from official Sonic games just on the walls as posters. And I'm like, this isn't Sonic. This is just so bad.
It's really rough. I'm looking at this right now. It looks like a nightmare. It looks like a child's nightmare. This is not the Sonic I know. Damn it. Sonic doesn't teach. He goes fast. It is time once again to thank my amazing patrons, starting with Terry Kinnair, Games with Coffee, BT Goebbels, Julian of the Stage Select Podcast, Seth Sergil of the All N Media Network, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Elitist, the Let's Play Princess, Greg Seward of the Player One Podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, Philip Becker, and the one and only Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these wonderful people in supporting the show financially, mosey on over to patreon.com/A Gamer Looks at 40. Check out the tiers and sign up today.
Of course, Doom was a huge game in my house as a kid. I would tell my friends, and I've also told other guests on my podcast, Base Arcade Pause Menu, that I somehow won a cosmic lottery where my parents were 100% fine with letting a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, the 5-year-old being my younger brother, play Doom with no parental supervision.
That's great. When you said Doom, I keep track and I take notes as we have these conversations. And I'm like, kindergarten?
Yeah.
Doom. What? That's good for them. Good for them. Hey.
I think so. A little bit of backstory. My dad worked in law enforcement. He's retired now. And when he would show us games like that, he would make sure that, especially when we were super young, he's like, now, boys, this is playing pretend, right? This isn't real. Like, yeah, of course. These monsters don't exist. This is a video game. This we knew. I think we got lucky because we were very, we knew we were kind of steeped in reality, but then there were times where we weren't steeped in reality. Like, I remember when I was a kid and I was just so much into the Pokemon craze. Like, I was neck deep in Pokemon, and I just wanted Pokemon to be real so bad. And I even thought that, okay, because there was like a map of the world, right? You see a map of the world, but then I thought to myself, but what's on the other side of that? And I thought that was like, oh, this is only half the planet. And then my dad was like, no, that's the whole planet. There's no other side where all this fantasy stuff exists. And I was like, dang it.
I love that. My son's very into Pokemon now too. He's 7, so he's right in that age bracket where he loves the cards and everything else. And so now by extension, I like the cards because he likes the cards. So we were playing the game and all that. I never grew up with Pokemon. I'm much older than you. Pokemon was like 96, 97. I was in high school and I kind of missed, I missed that wave. That was like a little too kiddie probably for me at the time.
Oh no.
But it's kind of cool now seeing my son being into it. I probably had friends who were into it back then, so.
It is, I will not lie, it is definitely a trip. Being a Gen 1er, if you will. Because I still remember the day my parents came home and they had copies of both Red and Blue. And I, being the oldest, they let me pick first.
Ooh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, because I don't know how, I think they were talking with another parent when they were picking my brother and I up from school, and that parent was talking about these Pokemon games. Then the second my parents found out that that it was a 2-player game, you need 2 different copies of the game, but my brother and I could work together. I think that was enough to convince them to buy these games for us. Because that's what they did. They bought both Red and Blue. We both had Game Boys at the time. Hard-fought Game Boys, mind you. Because originally my parents were just wanting to get us the one Game Boy, but I wanted my own, so...
You gotta get your own. Come on now, you can share that.
They finally relented, and good thing that they did, because after I got my Game Boy, here comes Pokemon. And they're like, okay. So they come to my brother and I, or they call us into the kitchen, and there they are on the table. So, of course, I picked red version. Excuse me, I picked up red version, which thankfully my brother didn't want because he thought Blastoise was the cooler Pokemon. He picked up blue. And also, they bought us a link cable because you needed the link cable to play. But they bought us a third-party one, but still, it worked. And it was awesome. But once again, this came out, we got our games in 1998. I was in like first, second grade at the time. Still didn't really understand how to play Pokemon.
But it was still accessible and fun. Yeah. It's funny how my son, he went to a summer camp a couple of years ago, and he came home and he goes like, "Daddy, I want Pokemon cards." Out of nowhere, because somebody at the summer camp had brought the binder of cards. Now I live in this world and I know what these things are, so he can't fool me too much on this. And I'm like, dude, man, I don't know if you do all your chores for the week, and maybe we'll see about getting, a set or something. So he does. So I go online and I'm like, hey, internet, what do I get my son to play the Pokemon game? I want him to learn how to play. I get him a starter set with like the Battle Academy, has a board with all the counters, so you can play the game.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach my son how to play this game. I don't know how to play it. He doesn't know how to play it. He can barely read because he's probably 5 or so at the time. And all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I need to learn this game for myself. So my wife and I, that evening, spent 2 hours learning how to play Pokemon the card game so I could then teach it to Will the next day. And we had a blast. This is actually a lot of fun. I never played a deck building game. I had friends who were being into Magic. I have a brother-in-law who's huge into Magic. Never played a deck building game. I'm like, this is kind of neat. This is kind of fun. So fast forward now, I bought him. I was at PRGE in October. I bought Will his first graded Charizard. Got him a nice graded Charizard, his first one. He was like, can I play with this? I'm like, no, you don't take it out of the package. It's a graded card. You're not going to understand what this is. So it's really fun. So long story short, it's cool to see that still kind of, because I see you have a couple cards up there behind you on the wall there. So
oh yeah, so yeah, those are like my yeah, those they had like the oversized starter sets to celebrate. I want to think it was Pokemon's 25th anniversary, and they had oversized versions of all the starters, and I hung up my starters from the games. So of course I have Charmander, Cyndaquil. You probably can't see. I skipped Gen 3, and then I went to Gen 4. I picked up Diamond, and I started with Turtwig instead, because I bought the game because a few friends of mine were playing, and they said, I'm going to be the starter, you be another starter. So I got Turtwig instead of Chimchar, and then I restarted my file, and I got Chimchar anyway. So
nice.
But yeah,
very cool.
And it's hilarious how you and your wife learned how to play the Pokemon TCG, because I mean I was in the middle of the Pokemon craze, dovetailing into Pokemon for a hot second. We'll get back to PCs, I promise.
No, that's totally fine, man. I'm totally fine with this. This is fine. Yeah, go for it.
And when I was at PRGE 2 years ago, and I was looking around and I saw a copy of the game Pokemon Trading Card Game for the Game Boy Color. And I figured, you know, I'll just go ahead and pick it up. And after 25 plus years of loving Pokemon, of falling out of the Pokemon card phase and just like looking at it now, like, you know what, I'll just give this a shot. Dude, I am so mad because when I was a kid, I tried to learn how to play the game so many times. My parents would try to read the instruction manual so many times, but they could not make heads or tails of it. And every time when I would try to read the instruction manual, I would always remember there was this page in the instruction manual that says, do not read this instruction manual unless you've played Pokemon a few times. And I'm like, what does that mean? How do I get the first version of this instruction manual? I want to learn how to play. And never happened. So I had a binder. I had a bunch of Pokemon cards. Got rid of them when I was like a teenager because, you know, I don't care about Pokemon anymore. I'm a teenager now. And even when I bought Diamond version, I was expecting my brother to grill me about how I was like, Pokemon's for children. Thankfully, he did. He saw I was playing it. He said, dude, you got it. Oh my gosh, I heard this game was so good. I'm like, what? I was very confused. It was one of those like, huh? And finally, after learning how to play the game 25 plus years later, I'm now back into Pokemon cards. I'm trying to build a tournament deck. I'm playing the card game on my phone. I have a friend at my job who gives me a bunch of the code cards for the TCG Live. And even I'm teaching my fiance how to play thanks to the Pokemon Game Boy Color game that's now on NSO, the Nintendo Switch Online service. Yep. And I'm just like, it took me this long, and this game is actually really fun to play, and I am having an absolute
it's a lot of fun.
Blast.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, my son and I we play it not often, but we definitely we're still getting into like resistances, like we're still easing our way into like some of the harder things in the game, like like resistances and status effects, but he's got the basics, and he'll play against friends in school and stuff, and the kids he'll like, oh, no, you're not playing it right. You're not playing. No, you can't do this. You can't evolve this yet. And he's kind of schooling his friends on it, which I think is actually very fun. But yeah, man, very, very cool. So with our last few minutes, I'd love to chat about, again, continue on the PC train, because what other games do you remember as you were kind of exploring the PC for the first time, or even as you kind of continued on? What were you into?
Definitely. PC was still very limited. Even when we got an upgrade computer, because obviously our Windows 95 didn't last forever. It got slower, it got bogged down, but there's another PC game that I remember playing. It was a sports game, but it was one of my favorite sports games, and it's still a game that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and it was Backyard Baseball 2001. It was 2001 or 2002. Okay. But it was the very first iteration of Backyard Baseball that had the Major League Baseball license and the teams from the game. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, backyard baseball is a sports game where you play as kids in a literal backyard, or backyards, plural. It's just a fun baseball sports game. You do things in the game, you get crazy bats, you get crazy pitches. It's all fun. But the year when they finally brought in Major League Baseball, they said, okay, to represent every single baseball team, we're going to have one player from every team represented as a kid. And of course, when you go pick your roster, you can put those kids on your team. Now, of course, there was like the regular backyard baseball cast, which was like, a bunch of fun, kooky characters that everyone loves. But for me, I'm a big Dodgers fan. So having, of course, Sean Green, I had him on my team, but also just to like rub salt in the wound for all the Giants fans that I knew, having Barry Bonds on your Dodgers team and have him win a backyard baseball World Series in a Dodgers uniform was just like, ha 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 ha.
That's good.
Had me evil cackling. Not only that, Randy Johnson, he was my starting pitcher for Arizona Diamondbacks because he was playing for the Diamondbacks at the time. But it was just so much fun. And even now online, there are times I scroll through TikTok or I'm just like looking through Instagram Reels, just wasting time. And there are people who are playing backyard baseball. And they're just commenting, they're having so much fun with it. And I would say it's a very, not a rudimentary game, but it's definitely a good first, it's a kid's game, but it's a kid's game to get kids into baseball video games. And then, if they're interested in that, once they get older, they could go to, like, say, MLB The Show or the more hardcore simulated baseball games. But this one's more of arcade style, and I loved it. I even have a Game Boy Advance version of the game, which I still really love, even though the PC port is better because you have the commentators making better witty commentary. Sure. When your player is up to bat, you hear kids go, "Hey, batter, 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 hey, batter, batter, miss batter."
That's cute.
They're kids, so I would definitely say that was another game that I was really into. Jumpstart for Kids was something I liked. Second grade version specifically because there was like a jukebox mode in it, and I would just keep hitting the change button because the whole point of it was like, make sure you put in the right amount of money so you can listen to the song. I just found a weird hack where I would just like recycle and just like put money in and hit the change button so I could put what I needed to listen to the song that I liked. And
that's funny.
And then it just evolved, and then Easter morning one day, my brother and I woke up. We walked to the living room because we had this little tradition of watching this VHS tape with 2 Easter-ish movies on it, and we see our dad plugging in our PlayStation. That was our Easter present. Our big Easter gift was our PlayStation, and
nice.
He was kind of grumpy. I don't know if it was because he just woke up late or he forgot to plug it in the night before, but he was just like, And when he plugged it in, my brother and I were like, whoa! And he was like, okay, here's the game. This is how you turn it on. This is what you do. Don't wake me up. And he went back to bed.
I love it. That's definitely a me move. Here you go. Yeah. Set up. Have fun.
Yeah. And once we got the new PC, of course, unfortunately, Sonic CD wouldn't install on that new PC, and our PC gaming didn't really go anywhere. We tried with Half-Life, but my parents were very much into the whole, we can't put games on the computer because it slows the computer down. Even though that's technically not true, but at the time it kind of seemed like it was.
Sure.
The last PC game I ever bought was Sega Smash Pack Volume 2. I had the first volume for the Sega Dreamcast, but it didn't have Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on it. This one did, so I got it, and thankfully I was able to. It was an easy install. A bunch of old Genesis games on there, which I was happy because I was like, cool, I can finally play Sonic 2. But then I just moved away from PC gaming altogether and just focused on consoles, because by then we had a PS2, we had an Xbox 360, we had a Wii, I had a Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, I had a bunch of consoles at that point, and PC games were just not the greatest. I tried to get into World of Warcraft when it was like really, really big, but even then my parents were like, they didn't like the idea of playing video games online with other people. Right. Even though my brother was able to get away with it with Half-Life, it was still very tricky in a way. Like, we didn't know how the servers worked. We were like no one was teaching us how to do this at all.
Yeah, right. You're kind of figuring it out and trying to plug things in and make it work. No, I totally get that. Yeah, that makes sense from like a parental thing. It's one thing to have it on to play a game and be, contained, and the other thing to be online. It's just a different vibe. Yeah, I could totally get that from a parental perspective. No, that makes sense, man. Yeah, this backyard baseball, I've never heard of it. It looks adorable.
Yeah,
It looks like a really cute game. I remember that era of baseball. I was a big hockey fan growing up, huge hockey fan. But baseball was a second, but my brother was really into it. And I remember that I grew up on the East Coast, so of course the Yankees were, my whole family are Yankee fans, and so I remember that whole thing. So that's really cool that they gave you one real player.
Yeah,
one real one that you could you
get one
juice your team up with. That's really, really neat.
Yeah.
Very.
Who's your favorite hockey team? I gotta know. Who's your favorite hockey team?
Oh, I'm a Devils fan.
Go Kings, go!
Okay, there you go.
Die hard, Alec. You must hate me. 2012, when we hoisted the cup for the first time at the Devils' expense, I was on cloud nine.
I was in California when that happened. I was at I was in Temecula, I guess right. I had a friend's wedding, and I was there for a few days, and it was right around the finals. And I remember watching it in the hotel room, just going, they're not gonna. No, Jonathan Quick was literally too quick. And it was not to be. It was a nice run, and then what preceded after that was 10 years of just terrible hockey from my beloved New Jersey Devils. I was a season ticket holder for a while. I did a podcast for a while.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love my beloved New Jersey Devils. Finally, they're good again. Although they're not great right now. But they're good again. They're having a bit of a down year, but they're not embarrassments. They're not an embarrassment like they've been for.
Yeah.
Thanks once again to Ben for taking time out of his day to chat with me about all things games and about his passion for games as well. He really loves this medium, and it shows whenever anybody talks to him. So please check out all of his work. His main Twitter he can be found on Twitter at BenMagnet27. There are links to all of his everything in his main bio. Thank you very much for checking out this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. Thanks as always to Kev and Pete for cutting up these interviews when I send them to you. Thank you once again for listening, and until next time, just be kind to yourselves and each other.